Hi guys, I'm Darren, and in this video we're going to be checking out the new TWIN X Lite from FrSky. So this is a new compact radio from FrSky, similar to the game controller type radios that you might have seen in the past. In fact, FrSky have done the X Lite themselves, so this is a more modern version of that, but also you've got things from Radio Master and Jumper, like the Zorro, that sort of thing, which are a similar sort of compact size. So what's coming new in this radio, and will it be the right sort of radio for you? Now, before I get started on this video, I really need to say that I'm not the biggest fan of these tiny little radios. I did set up an original X Lite for a friend of mine, and I just didn't get on with it at all. It just didn't feel nice for me. It was basically an Xbox 360 controller, but the gimbals felt really sort of fragile. I just didn't like it, to be quite frank. So it will be interesting to see how we get on with this radio here. Before we open the box, let's take a quick look at the website and just see sort of rough costs. Obviously this is probably different in your region, but this is what it's available for over here. We can see on here we're about £285 for the TWIN X Lite, and the S version is around £345. So it's about £60 difference between the two. So let's click into the X Lite, which is the one I have here. It's actually available in two colors. I think this darker one here is the charcoal, and there's a more sort of silvery color. From the pictures, it sort of looks like the X Lite, but the screen sort of says it's a bit bigger. So it'll be interesting to see how big this thing really is when we get it out of the box. Unfortunately, I don't have an X Lite here for comparison, but I can get the X20 out and we can have a look at that. So there's a load of specs here, but I'll briefly take a look at the comparison between the two. So you can see most of it is basically the same between the two. They both have dual 2.4 gigahertz internally, so we'll get into that a bit later on. 2 momentary switches, 2 sliders and 4 switches, 6 trims, which is nice, so they've got the extra trims on there, and 4 quick mode buttons. So instead of on the X20 and X18 where you have the 6 buttons, they've only got the 4, but you've still got the option of using those. They come with a light bay. The S has a matte finished high brightness screen, so a bit better screen on the S. The S also has 4 gigabytes of internal storage compared to 1 gigabyte, and the S has the built-in gyro and better gimbals, but you can see the rest of it is basically the same. So let's have a look and see what we've got. Right, so before I get it out of the box, I just thought I'd put on camera. This is the obviously the X20S, so I put it up to that bottom corner. You can see the box is smaller than the X20, so it's definitely a smaller transmitter, but we'll take a look and see how small. Right, so let's open up the box. Inside we have a regular carry case that we're used to. So this is sort of the Evo style, I think they call it, carry case. I've just noticed there's some hooks on the side, so maybe that's for bungee, so you could actually hook it onto a backpack, something like that. So yeah, they could be quite useful for transportation. But yeah, it's a pretty small bag. Right, so the size of the case, we've got about 235 millimeters by around 180, 190. Yeah, that's quite floppy. And the depth is around about 90 millimeters. So let's take a look at the radio. I must say, I do like these cases, and I like the fact that FrSky have started labeling the cases. Hopefully we'll see that on more cases in the future. And I also do like this little storage area. So what we have here is a little spec card, and I guess that will take you to the manual. We have our protective transportation foam, which is nicely molded to the transmitter. And then we have our transmitter in a bag. Let me zoom out a bit. Okay, so let's take a look. Actually, it looks like a really nice greeny colour through this bag. Yeah, and actually in this lighting, it's like a mint green, which that is really quite cool. It's quite iridescent. Yeah, I like that finish. Obviously the other finish is the charcoal, which is like a dark sort of grey colour. Yeah, there's a couple of scratches on it already, so that might be a little concern, is that it may be easy to scratch this finish, but it looks quite cool. It's definitely different. Yeah, it feels nice and light, so let's get the scales out. 165 grams or 166 grams. And this is obviously with battery and all the antennas, because you don't need external antennas. In fact, you can't have any. So yeah, 466 grams. So yeah, a nice light transmitter. So yeah, feeling this is definitely bigger than the original sort of X Lite. I'd imagine that it's not a lot bigger, maybe about to here on the outside, but it definitely feels bigger. And actually the extra width on this radio makes it feel a bit nicer in the hands. So the gimbals, the problem I had with the originals is the gimbals just felt like I was going to snap them, and they were, you know, no matter how I tried to set it up, they always felt a bit too soft to me. But these feel quite nice. At these extremes, that's not too bad, but these extremes is a little bit, for me, not the most comfortable thing, but it feels like it's something that you would get used to. It's not like I can't actually get to the extremes, and it's only that one, but I think it's something that you'd get used to very quickly. But yeah, the gimbals actually feel nice. They are full CNC gimbals, and yeah, they actually feel decent. Let's have a quick overview of what controls we got. So for most people, this is pretty standard. We have the return, system, model, display button, and a button in the middle, which is usually the page. We have the jog wheel with a click. So that's pretty standard for what we've seen on radios from about the QX7 onwards. So yeah, very familiar interface as far as that's concerned. We have our 2 additional trims here, and the 4 mode buttons, or however you want to set them up, they're multifunction buttons. On the top, we have a few buttons. Now this is where it gets a little bit confusing, because the buttons aren't what they usually are. So we have SA and SB. Now usually we're used to SA, SB, SC, SD, SE, SF, SH and SG. And I believe on previous radios, what they tend to do is just skip the letters so that the switches are in the same position. But in this one, they've actually relabeled the switches. I guess once you're flying, it doesn't really matter. You just use the switch that's in that place, and you get used to it with muscle memory. But this one, they have sort of moved the switches. So we have SA here, SB, SC and SD, and then SE and SF are momentary switches. And we have 3 positions at the front, and we have 2 positions both sides at the back. And we also have these sliders. Now the sliders was something, again, I didn't really like on the original X Lite. These, I can't tell if they are stiffer or not. The original X Lite ones were very easy to knock. So yeah, I was never a fan of those sliders, but there's not a lot of options when you're working with something this small at the end of the day. So the other thing that I noticed is there is no middle detent either. So if you're using them for something like pan and tilt, it may not be ideal because you can't just center them. On the top, if you've got an X20 or X18, you're very used to this. So we have a headphone jack, we have SD card slot, smart ports, and we have the trainer port. So you can use wired trainer as well as the inbuilt para. On the back, we have a light module bay. It's a shame that doesn't match the color. And obviously this is painted, so because the plastic itself is white, so if it does scratch off, you're going to end up with white under there, but there we go. And in the bottom, we have a USB-C, which can be used for charging and also the joystick hookup, that sort of thing. And in here we have our battery. The connector is at the top. So it does actually sit within a little shelf, and the battery we have is a 2.1 amp hour battery 2S. So that's 7.4 volts. So there we go, that's the radio. Or is it? Because it does this. So underneath here, what we have are the trims. So we have vertical and horizontal trim for this gimbal, vertical and horizontal trim for this gimbal. The down has been slightly elongated so you can sort of feel the difference. And yeah, I suppose you could get to them quite easily. We have the power button in the middle, and this part here is a pop out for an X strap. Doesn't quite balance as you'd want it, but it might have been better if that was switched the other way around, because it seems definitely sort of screen heavy. But there is an option to run neck strap if you want, and the power button in the middle. So let's switch it on.
Welcome to ETHOS. Throttle not idle. Switch warning.
So there we go. If you're used to ETHOS, this is normal. So if we take a quick look through, we'll see we have all the regular menus. As far as screen size goes, I would say it is probably X18 sort of size. So there's the X20. Yeah, it's definitely smaller than the X20. So yeah, we're looking at X18 size. The interesting thing was the power button's under here, but you can use this like this. And if you're flying, it'd probably be flying like this. So it's a shame the power button wasn't on the outside. Maybe the speaker moved somewhere else. But yeah, just an observation. But we have everything here. So we go in info. We can see it's come shipped with 1.4.3, which is out of date by a version now. We have the ADC on the sticks, which I'm actually going to be using this trying this out with my quads. So I will need to turn that off. But yeah, everything is the same as any other version of ETHOS if you've ever used it. You can obviously change between SD card and radio. I don't have an SD card in here, so this is all running off of the radio flash. And to be honest, I'm not going to be putting tons of maps or anything like that on here, so I will probably just not even use an SD card. I was getting to the point, if you've not used ETHOS before, you can actually download a simulator for ETHOS where you can actually check out how things work. So I will put a link to that in the video description. So we do obviously have our calibration. So it's got the gyro calibration. As far as I know, this hasn't got the gyro because this is not the S version. The place to find out is on the top here, I believe. So this is just a Twin X Lite. And if you've got the S, it should have the S shown there. On the back, it actually has both model numbers for this little plastic plate. So, so yeah, that's probably the place where you'll see the difference in the two. And we're going to do analog calibration. So I'm just going to center the sticks and center these sliders, which is all we need to calibrate on this one. So we'll click calibrate, then it asks to center. Now we're going to do full range. Now I do it slowly, one axis at a time, and don't push hard. Obviously with these metal CNC gimbal, it's harder to deform anything when you're doing the setup. So there we go. So that's getting all the edges. We're going both directions. So there we go. Calibration done. So let me just plug this into a computer a sec, because I need to update ETHOS anyway, so we may as well get that done. Okay, so there's a new version of ETHOS Suite, so I'm going to click OK, download that. And I like this. It's earlier versions of ETHOS Suite, I thought that it did do this, but now we've actually got confirmation that it does auto update, so that's great news. So I'm going to come back once this is updated. Okay, so that ETHOS Suite update, it was nice and painless, did everything for me, downloaded the file, said do I want to install it, you click yes, then when you finish it loads ETHOS Suite back up, so good work. But anyway, let's plug in this radio and get it updated. So with this one, the USB is on the bottom, and then we just get our usual options. I'm going to choose FrSky Suite. Then back on the computer, we now have our Twin X Lite model pop up. So I'm going to pop into ETHOS and I'm going to do update outdated components. So once this is done, because we know these days you just click that button, it does everything. I'll come back. Okay, so update successful, everything has gone through fine. While we're on this screen, I'll just take a little moment to address this part because people have asked questions about it. Obviously this should be running EU firmware. With 2.4 the antenna size doesn't matter, so unlike with 900 megahertz, the antenna size is the same, so you can switch between firmwares on this with no problem. The 900 megahertz, obviously the antennas are different lengths between FCC and EU. But yeah, this radio should be running EU because I'm flying in the EU. Well, unfortunately not, but in Europe, same rules. But you can see everything is updated. But let's check out the firmware on the transmitter. So I'm going to unplug and we'll wait for it to come back. What I'm going to do is turn on the internal module, and then we're going to go to the system info and see what we've got. So actually, yeah, my internal module has got the FCC firmware at the moment, so I do need to update this for Europe. But I'll make a video shortly to show how to do that, and I'll also explain what Flex firmware is because that again was another user request. Right, so I'm going to actually stop this video here, but I'll be back shortly. I'm actually going to work away, so I'm going to take this radio with me and have a play about with it, try it out on a few sims on my laptop and just get to grips with it. So when I conclude this video, I'd have had a lot more time playing about with it rather than just getting it out of the box. So see you in a sec. So it's been about 3 weeks since I made the first part of the video, and as I mentioned in that, I have been away with work and I did actually take the radio with me, and I'll go into that a little bit later on. But also I wanted to actually get out there and make sure I'd actually flown with it with a real aircraft and just get it in my hands, see the screen in the daylight and see how it all looked. I've just had a quick sort of go over the video I recorded last time, and I did mention that I would show like a comparison between the Twin X Lite and the X20 just for sort of size. So I think the easiest way is to actually put them both together like this. So there you go, you can see that it's a fair bit smaller, this radio. The screen is comparable to the X18, but yeah, it is a nice compact radio, which when I was away working was ideal. Putting it in the bag and taking it with me just took up hardly any room. So for going away on, if you're going on holiday, in a backpack, that sort of thing, the size of this radio is really good. But as I mentioned earlier, I was never a fan of the original X Lite, but having this extra bit of width definitely made a difference. So while I was away, I was in the hotel room in the evenings. I was actually doing coding work for iNav, and I was using this transmitter with a hardware in the loop simulator to actually test the code and actually fly planes in the hardware in the loop. And yeah, flying it was great. I also tried a flight sim, and again, yeah, for such a small radio, it feels quite nice, and I've never really got on with small radios before. Last weekend, I went to the flying field and I put a few packs through my quads with this. Basically, my FPV setup for planes, I still prefer my Horus, but that's purely because of switch layout, that sort of thing. It's just everything is where I want it on that radio. So that's why I don't really move. But I was flying my quads on this, everything was nice and precise. And it felt fine. I mean, I'm a hybrid pincher and everything was nice. I mean, if you're a thumber, it's probably good. I did mention in the first part that I think going down there may have been a bit far, but actually I've got used to it. It didn't take long to adjust at all. As far as the battery goes, let me see what I'm at. So I've only lost 1 bar, and I put, I don't know, it wasn't many packs, to be honest. It was maybe about 5-6 packs through, and it's lost 1 bar, so it should easily last a day of flying. The touchscreen in the daylight was fine to see and use, so again, no problems with that. And yeah, as far as actually using this transmitter goes, it felt nice in the hands. There's not really much else I can say. For a small compact radio, I do think that it's quite nice. But whether or not it will suit your needs, it's up to you. I do think that these sliders are a little bit loose, and that was always a complaint with the original as well. So yeah, they're just a little bit loose and they don't have any central detent. But other than that, for a small radio, I think it's quite good, and it has got quite a few options, especially with the four-way switch. So there is one other thing that I should really talk about, and that's the elephant in the room, which is ExpressLRS. Now, I know some people are going to have an opinion on this no matter what anyone else says, and I've already had a troll trying it on in the iNav group with a completely unrelated video. Where do I stand with the whole ExpressLRS thing? Well, firstly, I will say there is an ExpressLRS mode built into the radio firmware. Whether that will stay there in future releases, I don't know. It is at the level of ExpressLRS 2.3, which at this point in time, you can't actually download ExpressLRS 2.3 in the configurator to put it on a receiver. So on that quad right there at the back, I don't actually know what firmware I'm running. It's whatever came on the receiver, which I'm guessing is a version of 2 point something, but it bound and it worked fine. On my other quad, which is down there, it's running ExpressLRS 2.5. Again, it worked fine. But would I recommend to use the internal module for ExpressLRS? And to be quite honest, the answer is no. There's no problem with the way that it works, but it's already out of date by quite a considerable margin. I think it was about 2 days ago, ExpressLRS 3.2 came out. So that's quite a big jump. Quite a lot more features and development work. At the end of the day, regardless of what your thoughts are on anything else, from just a point of view of using the latest release, I don't really see any point of using the internal ELRS stuff because it's so far out of date. When it comes down to the other side of things, and this is where it sort of gets a bit political, if you're not interested in this, I'll be ending the video after this section, so thank you for watching, guys. I won't bore you with anything, but if this is something that you want to know my opinion on, then please continue to watch. So if you don't know the background, there is obviously the ExpressLRS open source firmware RF system, which companies can then put into transmitters, receivers. ExpressLRS then say, yep, it's all good with our system. We'll add you to the configurator, and everything just works together using their firmware. ExpressLRS is open source, which means that the code can be viewed on the website. Anyone can go and look at it. You could go and look at it right now. There's nothing stopping anyone from doing that. If you do use any of their code, there is a licensing system that goes along with open source software still, and the one that ExpressLRS are using is a GPL license. That means if you use their code or take a fork of their code and modify it, you are required, if asked, to provide a copy of your code if you do not have it just publicly released anyway. Now, what FrSky have on here is they're calling an ELRS compatible mode. They're not actually saying it's ELRS. And I have spoken to people from FrSky, and they have told me that they have written the code from the ground up. So they have not taken any of ExpressLRS's code whatsoever. It's all their own code, and it's running on hardware that ExpressLRS doesn't even support. So there are two sides to the story, and to be honest, without evidence, who's to know what the truth actually is? If ExpressLRS are correct and the GPL has been broken, obviously I'm against that. I contribute to open source software. I've contributed to iNav, for example. So from my point of view, as an open source developer, if someone takes a fork, modifies, then releases and makes it a closed source system, to be honest, that just doesn't sit right with me at all. But if they haven't done that, if they've written their own code, then they've not done anything wrong. Pretty late on Christmas Eve, Wesley Varty posted in the ExpressLRS Facebook group about the module or the radio, mentioning that it is an old version of ExpressLRS, and that's why he doesn't recommend that people use it, because there's no guarantee that it will be updated to the newer versions. There's no guarantee of support. So I think they were fair comments to make, to say it's not an official release and we don't know what the support path is. So that was a fair enough comment. And it was also hinted that it could be a GPL violation, but this is just opinion. At this point, nobody has the facts for that. And later on, actually, Wesley did say it could be, but it isn't. But that was sort of buried in a few posts. If FrSky is saying that they wrote this code from the ground up, we have two competing stories. And at this point in time, we have no definitive answer. So what can we do? It's pretty much a stalemate situation. But unless someone who is independent, who has no loyalty to FrSky or ExpressLRS goes in, looks at both lots of code and says, yes or no, this is breaking of GPL, who's to actually know? I don't like accusing people of doing stuff without proof. And the problem with this is neither way has proof. So that's why I'm sort of on the fence, because what's the answer? And if anyone out there actually sits and looks at it, then they haven't got the answers either. I've seen a lot of hate in that post towards FrSky. I've seen other YouTube people slating them, but none of it has any evidence. What I try to do is just get facts out. I really don't care about company A being better than company B or any of that tribalistic bullshit, to be quite frank. I just want to provide honesty, and that means having all the facts and all the truth. And at the moment, we don't have that. So without any evidence, we can't make an informed decision. All I can do is give my opinion on how the radio works, how the radio feels. That's it. To be quite honest, if I was going to continue using ExpressLRS, I would get an external module, because then I'm on the latest version. I know any bugs in it are going to get fixed. The external modules actually work pretty well. It's quite a good integration using the Lua script. And of course, that isn't a break of GPL, because all the ExpressLRS stuff, you're installing it with ExpressLRS configurator. It's all external modules. The Lua script is just a setup script. And the Lua script is freely available on the ETHOS website. So that is not a break of GPL whatsoever. So that's my position. Some may agree with me, others may not. That's just the way of the world. And for me personally, the way of the world should be based on evidence and facts. But there we go. But anyway, that's what I think about the radio. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I hope you guys found this video useful. At the end of the day, I don't really care about all this drama. I just want to get videos out that people find helpful. So if you did, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to click the subscribe and bell icon to help get this video out to more people so they can learn about this too. Thank you very much, guys. Fly models like you stole them and have fun. At the end of the day, just have fun. Forget all the drama, have fun. Bye bye.